screens. Beautiful. Okay. Can everyone see the presentation right now?
Yep, you look good.
Beautiful. All right. So welcome to our monthly webinar for June. We are doing it on heart health, of course, heart smart eating patterns. So some of the things that we're going to cover today, first of all, just in case for you guys, if you don't remember, my name is Amanda. I'm a registered dietitian here with the WTC program. Today we're going to go over risk factors for heart disease, lab values and what do they mean, and also how we can go correcting lab values if they are outside of normal limits. What are some food and lifestyle factors that can negatively impact the heart, but then also more importantly, what can positively impact the heart? And then we'll do some great swaps so that we're not so we're finding a way to satisfy different cravings with healthier alternatives so that we can better manage through our day-to-day lives. So first of all, what are some risk factors for heart disease? First, we've got blood sugar. So it's always good to try to keep our blood sugar in control or prevent it from becoming out of control, especially if you have any family health history. The reason why blood sugar and heart health often gets tied together is that people with diabetes have a 2 to 4 times more likely risk of developing heart disease, right? And that's because that sugar that's circulating in the bloodstream, think of it as sugar is like a crystalline particle, right? It's kind of sharp, right? So picture as it's circulating through the bloodstream, and then if we have hypertension, which I'll get to in a moment, that creates a greater force, right? So now that greater force with that blood sugar is pushing that crystal sugar up against the blood vessel, which can cause a wound or a scab or a scrape. And that causes our immune system to get a little overreactive and go flood to the site and create what we would call something, what we want to say resembles something kind of like a scab, right? So it starts to build up and build up and build up, and that can cause different blockages. So this is why keeping our blood sugar managed and our blood pressure managed is very, very important. Next is, of course, smoking. Smoking is a major contributor of inflammation in the body as it impacts our microbiome and as well as our heart disease risk. That impact on our microbiome and our gut bacteria can create different byproducts that create more inflammation that can potentially cause elevated cholesterol, believe it or not. Physical inactivity as well. We want to try to burn off a lot of excess calories, excess weight, but it also is a way to get negative products out of the body. Pressure, like I said earlier. And lastly is our altered lab values too, to consider, which we'll get to later, which is like our HDL, think happy, think of like our police officer cholesterol, and then LDL, think L, lousy, not so good, and we want lots of HDL to get rid of that bad guy, that lousy LDL cholesterol, and bring it out of the body. And what is uncontrollable somewhat is our genetics, but I always like the expression that our genetics may load the gun, but our lifestyle pulls the trigger, right? It's a little bit of a wonky saying, but it gets the message across that our genetics are not be all end all. We have this ability to control our environment and control our lifestyle. So next is, what is an appropriate value for our blood pressure? So this has recently changed in the past couple of years. So if you haven't seen this new model, it's important to see that really the goal is always less than 120. If someone's normal is 110, you want to try to keep them, of course, at 110. It's okay to be less than 120. And most importantly, that diastolic, that's that measure of your heart at rest. You want to make sure is always around 80. When it starts to creep up, even if it's below 140, it's something to say, okay, I'm in the yellow zone. I need to start making some changes now so that I'm not becoming hypertensive. Next is our lipid profile. Now this can get a little funny because it's a lot of different terms, so stay with me, but we will be holding questions to the end like we've done prior. If you have any specific questions about these lab values, absolutely please ask me at the very end. William will also be answering some questions too. So total cholesterol. That is a measure of your LDL plus your HDL plus your VLDL, right? So that's that total combination of your cholesterol. So that could have some good things in there too, like your HDL, right? So a measure of your total cholesterol just means that there's a high amount of fat potentially circulating in the blood. It doesn't necessarily mean it's sticking though, right? Because we care if it's sticking. If it's circulating and nothing bad is happening, yes, we want to be weary of it, but there isn't a major problem if there's no blockages, right? Just giving us a warning to say, let's get that cholesterol a little lower. Goal is always less than 200 mg per dl. Then we have LDL cholesterol. So like I was saying, L for lousy. This is that bad cholesterol that can clog arteries, right? So this can even get broken down into two different categories. There's your type of LDL cholesterol that if you ever speak with your doctor about apolipoprotein A and apolipoprotein B. A is the fine, really dense type that can get stuck in small places and cause this buildup and this narrowing of the artery, right? Where it's apolipoprotein B is big and fluffy and can stay circulating but not necessarily stick. So sometimes it's good to get a feel for what type of cholesterol is circulating in the body. But overall, less LDL cholesterol is best, as increased LDL cholesterol can create risk for blockages, which, as we all know, can lead to heart attack or stroke, unfortunately. Then, like I was saying, HDL cholesterol, that police officer of the bloodstream, our happy cholesterol, think H, think happy. This is that good cholesterol. So what it does is it helps the liver to flush out and detox out that bad cholesterol. So they're quite literally like little police officers circulating the bloodstream, attaching onto that LDL cholesterol, and then dragging it out of the body to be excreted. We want lots of HDL. A great way to increase our HDL is also through, of course, through exercise, which we'll get to in a moment, and some healthy fats can be somewhat beneficial too. One that kind of is a little different from the rest is our triglycerides. So it's also a type of fat, so that's why it gets grouped here with our lipid profile, that increases our risk for heart disease. So this is a type of fat that often accumulates in high amounts in those who are eating a lot of processed sweets and sugars, often that have a lot of saturated fat and a high amount of sugar. So even though we're talking heart health and often our mind goes to dietary fat, sugar is something to definitely be mindful of as well. If one of us is diabetic or we have loved ones that are diabetic, of course, some other labs that we want to look for is our fasting blood sugar. We want to aim for less than 100 is always the goal. And that hemoglobin A1C, which is more of an average of our 3 months, where that fasting blood sugar is just a pinpoint in that moment, right? That fasting A1C is that hemoglobin A1C is an average measure of your blood sugar over those 3 months. And the goal is to be less than 5.7%. A value above 7% would be deemed uncontrolled blood sugars. So next, like I was saying, cholesterol in the arteries. We want a nice, normal, healthy, clear artery. Think of the expressway. No accidents, no nothing. Right now we have the artery narrowed on the right, depicting that LDL cholesterol, that bad cholesterol building up. Think of it as you're going along the expressway and there's accidents all over, so it's narrowing traffic and it's a little harder to maneuver now. Now we're going to bridge to William now, because William's going to talk to you guys now more so about different things you can do to impact these lab values to, lead a happier, healthier lifestyle.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the intro. There's one thing that I actually wanted to add, because I like the HDL and the LDL cholesterols, but the way I always remember which one's which, the HDL I remember as a highly desirable lipoprotein, and the LDL I always think as less desirable lipoprotein. That's kind of my little way to remember those ones. But afternoon, everyone who's attending. These are just some different non-heart smart ways to things that are in our diet that are not too good for us when we're thinking about our cholesterol and about our triglycerides. The first row there, you see, of course, baked goods. We have some fast food. Fast food is very highly processed, high in saturated fats. Not a good option. A lot of it is going to be fried in not such quality oils. Fried foods is the next category. Same reasoning there. Fatty meats. Although the high fat content meats do have a little more flavor because that's your marbleization, it does have a very high amount of saturated fats, and we tend to try and lean towards the leaner cuts, and chickens and even leaner beef, like a tenderloin or a fillet, because they don't have a higher fat content. You want to steer away from your highly marbleized meats, and that marbleization is the fat content. Now you also have your high fat dairy products. This would be like ice creams, full strength milk, you want to steer towards skim or low fat, 1%. Those milks have a lot less fat. And then processed meats. Processed meats also with the sodium it impacts them. They definitely have a high fat content, which can affect the cholesterol level, which we will touch on in a little bit. Triglycerides, like she said, they are a fat that is transported in the bloodstream, but it also is what your body uses to store carbohydrates. So the liver converts sugar and beverages, like you see the sugary foods and beverages. If it has excess sugar, it'll convert it into triglycerides as storage. So if you have more of these sugary foods and beverages, also white breads, which are high in, very quickly converted into triglycerides, it can be an issue. Alcohol the same way, and overeating, you have to watch out with overeating because the more food in your system, the liver is going to definitely convert that into triglycerides. Now, in the 80s, we tried to eliminate the fat from the diets, but in lieu of that, they had to add back the flavor, which the fat is just flavor. They added back in the sugar to try and appease the palate, and then that started a whole nother problem. So now you're slowly seeing these low-fat products reducing their sugars, and it took many years for this to happen because up until maybe even 5-6 years ago, a low-fat yogurt would have 25 grams of added sugar into it, which was no good. So this is something to think about. We have the also some other things that can affect your lipid levels. She went over some, the genetics, medications. Type 2 diabetics have to watch out. Smokers, inactivity, stress, and also poor quality sleep. You want to be able to get a good rest when you're doing your rest. Next slide, please.
Absolutely. And guys, just to recap, with saturated fat and the marbling in the meats, if you aim for meats that end in loin, round, or chuck, they're gonna be naturally a little bit leaner. But just try to definitely look for that marbling. And what William's saying is like the marbling as in like those fatty white streaks, because any fat that is solid at room temperature is a saturated fat, and that's gonna go for our coconut oil as well. I'm gonna shift over.
Great addition, thank you. Yeah, because you heat up the animal fats, they turn at temperature, they will turn into a liquid. So what do we need to watch out for? We want to watch out for the high sodium foods. Our daily values is, you don't want anything greater than 20%. Okay, so 20 is plenty. The goal limit for the day, 1,500 milligrams to 2,300 milligrams per day. You'll see it in cheeses, soups, processed meats, cold cuts, deli sandwiches, fast food, frozen food, soy, and pickles. I always tell people, too, to watch out for the hidden salts that you don't even think might be in food because maybe it doesn't have that kind of flavor. It's something that you wouldn't think. The salts can be hidden in almost everything because it does act as a preservative, too, so it's used in products that you wouldn't even expect. You want to watch out for foods high in saturated fat. And again, that's the 5 grams of saturated fat, which always 100 grams of food. Common culprits here are the fatty cuts of beef that she touched on, that I touched on. There's pork. It's always going to be high. Dark meat chicken with the skin on. Poultry with the skin on. We have to watch out for those dairies again, those full-fat dairies. And the tropical oil, she mentioned the coconut. Foods high in added sugar. That's a beautiful thing with the new nutrition labels. They actually added a line for added sugars. So there are sugars that will occur naturally in foods, and that's usually okay, but there's also going to be added sugars in a lot of these products, and they finally added that line to the nutrition label, which is actually a very good thing. But you want to keep that to, no more than 10 grams per serving is going to be a very high portion, so keep it to less than 10 grams. The goal for the day is less than 36. Okay, that's about 9 teaspoons. Okay, that's going to be for men. For 24 grams a day for women, that's about 6 teaspoons. So keep in mind your coffee in the morning or your tea if you're a tea drinker. Keep in mind that you want to kind of, maybe save yourself a little bit of sugar for later in the day if you want to have another cup of coffee later in the day. Okay, next please. All right, so what slide are we up to?
What's the deal with cholesterol in food?
There you go. So what's the deal with cholesterol in food? Now, there's lots of evidence-based studies that have happened over the years. Available evidence, shows no appreciable relationship between the consumption of dietary cholesterol and serum cholesterol. But generally, with foods that have a high cholesterol content, they're going to have a high fat content, which is the saturated fats. So if you're lowering one, you're actually going to be taking away the other. Cholesterol is not a nutrient of concern for overconsumption. Your body will produce enough cholesterol to do all its cell generation as well as any transport. So the body does produce cholesterol at as much as it usually needs. Egg yolks contain a high amount of cholesterol. but they also contain 5 grams of saturated fat, which is not a very, not the good fat. So what we suggest sometimes is to try and keep your eggs to 6 a week. But also, if you're going to do an egg and you want to do a little scrambled egg, do 1 whole egg and maybe 2 egg whites just to add a little more substance to it. You still get a little bit of the yolk, but you're not having a full 3 egg yolk scramble. You're actually having, more egg white. So that's always a nice option to do. Shellfish is also very high in cholesterol, but they also do contain sodium, especially if they're prepackaged or if they're canned. They might actually insert more, so you got to keep that in mind. There's the LDL receptor activity in the body is inhibited by saturated fats. So that's kind of one of the things that you want to think about too with saturated fats, is that if you're intaking a lot of saturated fats, it's actually going to reduce the activity receptors for the LDL, which is the cholesterol that you want to have exiting your system. So saturated fats actually contribute to you keeping a little bit of LDL, which is not usually desirable. I was going to mention a little bit about the next screen with the cheeses. There's some Heart Smart options with cheeses, because the cheeses are always kind of maybe can be a little confusing. You do want to do some reduced sodium feta or goat cheeses. Those are usually definitely have a better, have a lot less saturated fats, but they're higher in monounsaturated fat, which is a more healthy unsaturated fat. Low-fat cottage cheese is a great option. Calcium, vitamin Bs, and protein are added to that, but the sodium will vary. It says here by brand. Low-fat ricotta cheese is a good option. You could do the mozzarella, but part skim is always more healthy. Good for a snack, good for mealtime if you're doing something with melted cheese. And it also does produce a little bit of gut health. And reduced fat cheddar. I know it might sound strange, but there is reduced fat cheddar on the market, which is actually very nice. And this is a nice nutrition label right here that I was actually mentioning before. This is from Sargento, light string cheese. I've never actually tried this cheese, so I don't know how the quality of it, but it says right here, if you look at it, I got to enlarge it a little bit. If you take a look at the saturated fat, 3.5 grams out of the total 6 grams is saturated fat. So more than half of the total fat is going to be saturated. So the serving size is 1 piece, 28 grams. That's going to be, about the size of the pair of dice. Okay, 80 calories, not too shabby. I also pulled out of my fridge today the Bon Bell, the Baby Bells, and I actually checked that nutrition label, and it's 70 calories, and it's very similar, but it's 5 grams of total fat with 3.5 grams of the saturated fat. So it's similar, and it's actually a nice cheese also, the Baby Bell. So that other product I wasn't too familiar with. But there's also cheeses that you want to avoid. Now, American cheese, definitely want to avoid. A single slice contains 25% of the recommended daily intake of saturated fat. Very high in sodium because it is very processed. Pasteurized processed cheese spreads, bries, and other super soft cheeses. This goes for your Camembert, your Roquefort, your blue cheese. These are your cheeses that definitely have a higher layer of saturated fat. These are called your unripened cheeses. No, sorry, these are the ripened cheeses. These are the ones that we try to avoid. Cheeses that you might want to steer towards, Parmesan, even like we said, sharp cheddar. And Swiss can actually be a nicer option too, because Swiss is definitely a little bit lower in saturated fat, but you want to check your labels and you want to check your portions, because if they're slicing it too thick, you might think 1 slice is a portion, but it's actually still going to be a 1 ounce slice. So you have to try and measure that out. Next slide, please.
Sorry guys, we had a little bit of a technical difficulty go on. I got kicked out of the teams. So can everyone just see where we are right now on the Heart Smart Foods?
Yep, we're on the right slide.
Perfect. You guys can see it? Excellent. We're good to go. Sorry, Lauren.
So Heart Smart, you want to try and increase your healthy fats. This is going to be from your salmon, extra virgin olive oil. We want to do some avocados packed with polyunsaturated fats as well as monounsaturated fats. Almonds, chia seeds, flax seeds are a good option. And what these do is they help lower your LDL cholesterol and triglycerides. Walnuts also are high in omega-3 fatty acids, and those definitely lower your triglycerides. 1 ounce serving of unsalted nuts per day is beneficial in lowering your LDL cholesterol. There's the fiber option too. Fill up with fiber. American diet doesn't have enough fiber in it. The fiber found in fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds are always great because the saturated part of the fiber globs onto cholesterol and does not let it get absorbed. The unsaturated fiber helps you with your stool, with your bowel movements, and that just produces very nice gut health. So I always say to people, if you want to increase your fiber, just eat the skins on your fruit, eat the vegetables a little al dente. Try and get a little more roughage, little straight greens. You don't necessarily need to have a, you know, something without the skin. If you do the peas, you can do the pea pods also. So there's some nice way options to get some fiber, because you want to look for foods with greater than 3 grams of fiber on the label, because then that'll definitely enhance the bowel movements as well as reducing your cholesterol, because the soluble fiber does that for you. So high fiber foods like oatmeal, Cheerios, chia seeds are all a good option. Cholesterol takes it right out of the body, so that's definitely a nice option. All right, and she'll take us home from here. Thank you for having me, everybody.
Great job, William. Thank you. Here's some more Heart Smart decisions. I'm just loading the whole page right now. So we want to make sure we hydrate responsibly. And what we mean by that is if we're having any high carb beverages, but to be specific, high sugar beverages, so greater than those 10 grams of sugar we were talking about. 10 grams total in this case, not necessarily 10 grams of added, right? This can be juice, Gatorade, soda, iced tea, sugary coffee, alcohol, etc. Foods that are drinkable, right? Beverages that have more calories and sugar in it. Water's great, but I know sometimes water isn't always the most palatable option. So sometimes if you find that you need a little bit more flavor, adding in different herbs or frozen fruit, treating the frozen fruit like different ice cubes, that can be a great way to add more variety into your beverages, especially doing like a flavor combination like blueberry basil, for example, or just putting some lemon wedges in your water. Everyone's water needs are different, but a good general recommendation is to have about 8 ounce cups of water per day. If we're exercising more so for every hour of physical activity, we want to try to have 8 to 16 fluid ounces. Then that varies based on how vigorous that activity is, of course. So something to consider too is as we increase fiber, the muscles along our colon, they need a little bit more of a workout sometimes, right? So if we haven't done a bicep curl in a while, we get a little fatigued, we get a little sore, right? So think of fiber as being like that resistance training for the muscles along our colon. Sometimes as we're increasing fiber, those muscles need to gradually build up, right? So it starts to cause sometimes a little bloating, a little discomfort, maybe somewhat constipation at first. But it's always a good idea to increase your water while you're increasing your fiber to help pass that bulk along, to keep digestion more regular until your colon starts to adapt and get strong for that fiber that's coming through regularly. Seltzer is okay to have, absolutely. A seltzer is a great option to have at lunch just to add some more variety in. And different flavors, as long as they're unsweetened, can be a good option, but not to be relied upon too much, as there is often artificial sweeteners in it. Now, what I was saying too is increased physical activity. That's going to be a great outlet for reducing inflammation in the body overall, which helps us to maintain a healthy heart. But like I was saying earlier, it's good for helping to increase those HDL levels. If we need to get those HDL levels up a little bit, or if we're trying to get that LDL down, increasing our HDL is a great way to try to combat that. So both cardio and strength training is great and recommended for everybody. The minimum amount of moderate intensity exercise recommended for individuals is about 150 minutes a week, or vigorous activity 75 minutes per week. It's also recommended that we strength train 1 to 2 times per week, 2 times per week, trying to hit each major muscle group at least twice during that time. So just 2 full body circuits would be a good way to hit that goal. You don't need to use weights, it can be body weight as well. With this moderate versus vigorous exercise concept, the way to tell if it's considered more vigorous activity is if it's difficult for you to string together a set of 7 words or sing without taking a breath. Moderate, of course, you can string together those words without having to take a breath. But most importantly, when it comes to physical activity, is to focus on consistency and doing activities that we enjoy that will help it to remain consistent and also aid us in our mental health, as it's an outlet for our stress often. Next is some Heart Smart swaps. So we all New Yorkers here, right? So we all love a good bacon, egg, and cheese from time to time, especially a good long New York bagel, I should say. So this option would not be considered like a heart healthy option. First of all, we can see the saturated fat is about 12.2 grams, which is over the limit, and the sodium is equivalent to some of our daily allotments for sodium. But there's healthy swaps we can put in place, of course. So like doing a slice of whole grain bread, we all love the Dave's Killer bread. They also have the thin slice for those watching the carbohydrate content. Most of the options by this brand we do approve. We do like the Super Seed a lot as well. We could do 3 egg whites or 2 egg whites and 1 whole egg as well. It doesn't have to be just whites. Adding in some fiber from the tomato, as well as there's fiber from the avocado and healthy fat from that avocado as well. Can knock that saturated fat down tremendously. And you can see here the fat is 9.5 grams, but that fat is coming from the avocado and the feta cheese predominantly, which is predominantly that monounsaturated fat, similar to olive oil. It's that liquid at room temperature. Next, it's going to be, well, come on, we're all New Yorkers. We like our pizza from time to time. And not to say that there's bad foods and there's good foods, right? There's no morality attached to our food choices, but we try to have them impact the diet in a mindful way. So instead of cutting out that pizza from our diet entirely, we make more balanced decisions by trying to enhance that fiber from the salad, the fruits, the veggies that are going to make us feel full, so that we can have that slice of pizza, enjoy it, savor it, walk away from that table and feel satisfied. And I know I often hear from individuals like, I have to have that Coke with my pizza. I need something with flavor. We can always opt for an unsweetened tea. And even if we wanted to have a little bit of a sweetness in that tea, adding a little lemon juice or a packet of stevia, or even if it is just a packet of sugar, which is it's 4 grams for each teaspoon of sugar or coffee packet, that is still significantly better than a soda, which could be, depending on the size, between 30 and 75 grams of sugar. So those 4 grams, if needed, is really nothing compared to that Coke. Next, we all love our Ben and Jerry's too. I'm guilty of it, especially the Plenty of Fish flavor. But we can see that saturated fat for the entire pint is 33 grams, which is well over our daily needs. So we have a mystery dessert of what we can replace with this. And one thing I always want to leave us off on, especially as a dietitian, is I never want us to fear different foods or avoid foods entirely. All foods are good. We just have to find a way to have them included in the diet. So when in doubt, we can always portion, right? So although we're looking at that 1 pint, 1,100 calories or 1,100 calories, 57 grams of fat and 33 grams of saturated fat, 270 milligrams of sodium, we can now see doing this 2/3 of a cup of ice cream can bring us much more within our goals, knock that saturated fat down by at least over 1/3 by just portioning to 2/3 of a cup. Sometimes if we're not feeling full, it's a good idea to try to add some nuts to different desserts, as it'll give us some fiber, a little bit of protein, and some healthy fat that, as we all know, bind us to make us feel full, to help us with portioning. So I want to say thank you, and I want to open up the floor to you guys. If you have any questions for me or William, please let us know. This is definitely the space for it. Does anyone